Okay, ladies and gentlemen, you've already seen the joint market developer Adam Gibson, and he'll be talking about the Sigma protocols and why they should matter to every Bitcoin thinker. Welcome.
Mic's not working. Mike. Hello? Is this working? Oh, it is. Okay, great. Thanks. This talk's a bit different, a bit experimental, let's say. My plan here is to try to explain a concept which is kind of a deep concept in cryptography that actually spreads out and applies to a lot of different things we do in Bitcoin and certainly outside of Bitcoin as well. And you may not be familiar with the term Sigma protocol, but don't worry, I will explain specifically what Sigma protocol here, the Greek letter Sigma, means. I'm going to start with some just sort of some intuitions that will give you, that will sort of guide you into understanding it. My aim is that at the end of it, you're going to actually have a deeper feeling for what the Schnorr signature is. The Schnorr signature specifically is something that's we're constantly talking about it, certainly ever since Taproot and even before that in Bitcoin. But I hope to give you a deeper intuition of what that is. But more than that, I also want to give you an understanding of what's going on when people start developing these much more fancy, clever ideas like discrete log equivalence proofs is one example. And there's lots of different protocols being actively used and also developed. But they're still fundamentally coming from this Sigma protocol concept. So that's the idea here. So at the end, if we get time, I'll show you how we can combine them together, because that's where it gets really fancy and clever. So before I start this sort of intuitions, what are the ideas behind this, I want to at least mention practicality. This is an example. Don't worry, you're not supposed to read that. Okay, that's not even supposed to be legible, really. This is something I just screenshotted out of the documentation of something called privacy pass, which is a protocol used basically to solve captchas. If you're accessing websites that are protected by Cloudflare over Tor, for example, then you have this captcha nightmare. And the idea is to give people anonymous credentials. So this describes the anonymous credentials, or part of the anonymous credential system behind privacy pass. And if you try to read this, you're just going to see a lot of equations. A equals sy plus sg plus cy times sm. And it's oh yeah, OK, maybe you know what an elliptic curve point is. Maybe you know what a scalar is. I mean, Taj was talking about this earlier. But you probably won't understand what they're talking about here, because you really do need the foundations. So that's my sort of motivation here. Yeah, and I'm going to start by giving you some examples. Apologies for my terrible graphics. BIP 340 is the obvious example. BIP 340 is our new, fantastic new Schnorr signature protocol BIP. EDDSA is something similar. It's based on a different curve, whatever, it doesn't matter. Point is, they're basically Schnorr signatures, and Schnorr signatures are, to some extent, the canonical example of the Sigma protocol. ECDSA kind of isn't really, but that's a complicated story. We don't get into it. Anonymous credentials used, for example, in these systems. Signal and Wabi-Sabi, the new version of Wasabi, is using a similar kind of anonymous credential system to what Signal was using based on the same academic papers. Brave has a thing for anonymous voting, which again, all of these fundamentally are using clever combinations of Sigma protocols, which, as you've probably already gleaned, is somewhat related to Schnorr signatures, but it's not exactly the same thing. Other examples, some of these are kind of dodgy examples. First of all, I'm mentioning DLEQ, discrete log equivalence proofs. We're going to talk about that later. Lots and lots of examples, I'm kind of cheating, because it's all just variants of the Schnorr signature. From Schnorr signatures, you can build ring signatures. You can build blind signatures. You can build multi-signatures, right? And threshold signatures, obviously, as a variant of multi-signatures, which has been talked about extensively earlier in the day. If I really want to stretch it, I'll say bullet proofs, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard of, is a zero-knowledge proof system. I'm going to stretch it and say it's kind of a Sigma protocol because, as you'll see in a minute, the Sigma protocols fundamentally are kind of 3-round, but bullet proofs extends out, so it's many more than 3. But it's still fundamentally the same thing. If we go on to other zero-knowledge proof systems like ZK-SNARKs, you can't really say there's a whole different stuff there. Polynomial sampling, bilinear pairings, all kinds of stuff. Not really the same. Chalmian tokens, there's lots of things being built around Chalmian tokens, right? People are very excited about it, things like Fedimint. Again, it's kind of somewhat related, sort of. Last one I mentioned is password authenticated key exchange, which is kind of technical one. But again, same thing. So just some examples of systems that are using Sigma protocols. So 2 or 3 intuitions, I hope, will lead us into seeing the basic structure of the Sigma protocol and making it make sense, maybe. This one's a bit silly, and I came up with it. My idea is something like this. Suppose you wanted to prove that you have the secret recipe for Coca-Cola, right? You know, because famously back in the day, it was like, oh, it's a great secret, you know? So how could you prove that you knew the formula without revealing that you know the formula? So I'm sure a lot of you understand or have heard the term zero knowledge. This is what we're talking about here, right? Silly, like in an imaginary world, you could prove it like this. You could have a kitchen. You could have, say, right, we're going to arrange for the kitchen to contain every possible ingredient, you know, tens of thousands of different food, drink ingredients, whatever, including cocaine, perhaps, who knows. And we put all the ingredients in the kitchen. And the key idea there is that we lock you in the kitchen. So you're not going to be able to communicate with the outside world, and we're not going to be able to go in and look at what you're doing. There's no windows on this kitchen. Okay, it's all like a Faraday cage. There's no communication with the outside world. After some fixed time, if you can come out and give me a glass of Coca-Cola, then there's a sense in which you've proven you know the secret formula, right? So there's kind of a couple of steps there. There's a kind of a commitment phase where we kind of force everything into the kitchen and we say, that's fixed. There's nothing else, nothing can go in or out. And then there's a kind of there isn't really a challenge phase. This is a bit of a stretch, but there's a kind of me saying to you, I want you to give me specifically a glass of Coca-Cola. Perhaps if you're even more powerful, I might ask you to either give me a glass of Coca-Cola or a glass of Pepsi. You know, it could get even more weird. And there's a response phase where you're actually demonstrating to me your knowledge by giving me that glass of Coca-Cola, and I can taste it. I am, so to speak, the verifier of your knowledge by tasting it. But by verifying that you do indeed know that, I'm not, on the other hand, getting the information of what the formula is. Do you see the idea? That's the intuition there. So there's some vague sense here in which we're talking about there's a claim, there's a challenge, and there's a demonstration, right? Whimsically, I like to think this is sort of related to Albert Einstein's thinking, which is where he always used to say, what we want is operational definitions. You know, what is time? We can sit around as philosophers and have a little chat about what we think time is, but ultimately, we need like a concrete demonstration. So he said, oh, time is like can be measured by light bouncing between mirrors, you know, something concrete, an actual demonstration. So the Sigma protocol paradigm is kind of based around this idea. To win at the game, you have to be able to create a demonstration for any challenge. You can actually repeat the game, that's another story. But your demonstration must not reveal, but this is the idea, you know, your demonstration should not be revealing the secret, because it's trivial to prove to you that I know the recipe for Coca-Cola by giving you the recipe, yeah? Okay, this other intuition, I think I'll just skip it because I don't want to go on forever, and there's a danger I might go on forever. Homomorphisms. Now, I know this is a bit dry and abstract for people who aren't like into maths much, but just bear with me. I think this is going to be very useful. There's a concept in maths called groups. So a set of objects which have some rule where you can combine 2 elements of the group together. Like, the example I give here is integers. That's represented by the z. And the operation is plus. We can add integers. We get another integer. If there's an identity integer, 0, if we add 0 to any other element, we get the same element. And there's an inverse, which is the negative of the integer. So that's the general group concept. But if we can define functions on groups which move objects from one group into another group, right? So I can simple function. I've got all the integers, and I can use the function 2 times x. So what will be the output group? The output group is the group of even integers, right? 2, 4, 6, 8 instead of 1, 2, 3, 4, and the negatives. So a simple function like that has what we call a homomorphism, and it literally means homo means same, morphism means structure. It's like same, keeping the same structure. So it means that on the input we have a structure where a plus b maps to c, and on the output 2a plus 2b maps to 2c. So that's the concept of a homomorphism, and it's incredibly important. In cryptography generally, and certainly very specifically in our case today. Because let's think about what is cryptography really. I mean, we have a crude concept in our head that cryptography is about the idea of being able to hide things, yeah? So there's some clever mechanism to hide things. But a lot of cryptography wants to do more than just hide things, right? It wants to also sort of do stuff to the things that are being hidden. And our example there was, the secret recipe is kept hidden, but we're doing something with it, yeah? So we're trying to guarantee correctness without knowledge. So in our simple example of integers, where the function was to take individual integers and multiply them by 2, then clearly, if I give you this sort of the output of 16 plus 4 equals 20, there is a corresponding on the input group of 8 plus 2 equals 10, right? So before the 2 times function, we had 8 plus 2 equals 10. After, we have 16 plus 4 equals 20. The homomorphism means that the output has the same structure as the input, is what I'm trying to say. So that's not interesting, obviously, because it's trivial to go from 16 plus 4 equals 20 back to the original. There's no hiding involved there. So what we need to do is the same thing, but for functions that are what we call one-way. So if I give you the output, you can't find the input from the output, although you know that one exists. And because we have in something like an elliptic curve, as we use in Bitcoin, such a homomorphism, the homomorphism is on the group of points on the elliptic curve, and the operation is elliptic curve point addition, which, don't forget, is not the same thing as integer addition. But we have the same homomorphism nevertheless. And that's incredibly useful because it means we can do mathematical operations on the encrypted objects. Yeah? So that's enough intuitions to allow us, I think, now to understand the basic example of the Sigma protocol, which is really the Schnorr identity protocol, which is not the Schnorr signature, but it's like almost the Schnorr signature. So how do you prove? Actually, I'm kind of repeating something that Taj explained at the beginning of his talk about DLCs, because the DLC construct is exactly the Schnorr signature construct, but just shifting slightly the point of freezing or commitment. Anyway. To prove that you know this secret, what we do is we actually make up another secret. So the second secret we call the nonce often. So I'm using K to represent the nonce, and it has the public point R, and X to be the private key with a public key P. So the clever trick here, like in so much of mathematics, is to add another thing in to something, making it apparently more complicated, but then actually it all falls out. So the concept of the Schnorr ID protocol is simply this, that the prover sends as a commitment to the verifier the public point R. So notice he's sending an, in quotes, encrypted value R. The verifier is sending back a challenge. Now, what is that challenge? It's just a random number. It's literally just a random number. And then, so this is 3 steps. The third step, the prover sends the response to V. And I'm not telling you what that response is yet, but he sends a response. And just like when the guy comes out of the kitchen and gives you the glass of Coke, you can verify it, you can taste it, this guy can verify. Now, why is it called Sigma? This is a little bit of trivia. It's kind of funny, actually. A lot of people who've heard of this, because a lot of people even haven't heard of it, but who've heard of the Sigma protocol will say, oh, it's called Sigma because it kind of looks like a sigma, right? So the prover sends R, and then the verifier sends C, and then the prover sends the response. So that's 3 steps. But that's not really Sigma, is it? That's more like, what is that, like Z or something? I mean, right, but funnily enough, if you actually delve into the background of this, there's a paper from 1998 by these 2 guys, Ivan Damgaard and Ronald Kramer, and they're the ones who actually coined the term Sigma protocol. And it turns out that actually it's the most tortuous, ridiculous name, because they came up with this name based on what are called Merlin-Arthur protocols. Merlin-Arthur protocols are like, it's some very simple version of the Sigma protocol combined with zigzag protocols. So it's actually Zig-MA. Believe it or not, it's just terrible. But everyone since has always thought, oh, they must mean sigma like the capital Greek sigma. And so you'll see every paper that looks like that with a sigma. But it's not actually sigma, so whatever. So the rest of the talk is going to be basically just discrete log stuff, which won't surprise anyone here. But you should understand everything I'm talking about applies to any one-way function with a homomorphism. So you can use RSA, for example, and you can build exactly the same systems. Nobody does it nowadays because it's like old, slow, broken, and terrible is basically the correct summary of RSA. And then there's like newfangled things like lattices, which I don't understand at all. But apparently, such things exist because as long as there's a homomorphism, you can do it. So what does this whole thing achieve? Well, we make the response as being a combination of your original private key X with this new special key that you've created for this one time, as Taj explained earlier. So the response is actually the sum, or it can be the minus sign as well, of the nonce plus the challenge times X. So the verification is encrypted. The verification it hides what the secret is. The verifier only tastes the Coca-Cola. This second secret that we create, K, hides the first secret X, because just like if I give you the number 11 and actually my secret was 9, you don't know that I added 2. My secret could have been 8 and I added 3. Right? It's just, that's the idea of blinding by adding a number. And C binds or fixes the secret. And sort of whimsically, what you're doing with C is you're saying, we're forcing the contents of the kitchen to be fixed, right? Because how could somebody cheat in that Coca-Cola challenge? Well, they could actually like sneakily get a bottle of Coca-Cola into the kitchen, right? And then, hey, they've won the challenge without actually knowing the secret. So by C is kind of binding or fixing your secret to make sure that you have it. Because if you don't do that, you can cheat. And exactly because there is a homomorphism for EC point addition, this works. OK, to get to the signature, so what I'm going to do next is show you the Schnorr signature very briefly, and then I'll talk about how we can combine Sigma protocols together, and then I think it will start to make more sense. So the Schnorr ID protocol that I've just shown you is an interactive protocol, 3 steps. That's, imagine that Sigma thing, which isn't really a Sigma. 3 steps. It's honest, verify zero knowledge. I'm not going to explain that. It's computationally sound. That just means you can't win at the game without knowing the secret. But what we can do is to make it like a better version of it, is kind of fake the challenge. And these 2 guys, Fiat and Shamir, were the ones who came up, or there was a paper about this anyway, Amos Fiat and Adi Shamir. So like Fiat is fake money, so we fake the challenge. Yeah, stupid joke, yeah. So we make a random challenge be a hash of R. So the challenge C before was a random number that the verifier chose, but instead take as input the R value, the commitment, and put it through a cryptographic hash, which is a one-way function, but without a homomorphism. And consequently, you'll fix the R before you got the C. So it's a bit like we've closed the kitchen before you find out what you're doing. Now, actually, what goes in that hash is a big story. It's not just R. It needs to be R. Without R, the protocol is fundamentally unsound. But it's also a very good idea to put the public key, which is essentially the context of the problem, into the hash as well. And you can put more things in there. And specifically, you can put a message in there. And if you put a message in there, you're binding that message to the knowledge of the private key. And that's exactly what we mean by a signature. You can also add other things like domain separation tags, because if you're cool, that's what you do. You add domain separation tags to all of your cryptographic protocols. And that's what we did in BIP 340, because they're cool. So in summary, the Fiat-Shamir transforms the Schnorr identity protocol, which is the canonical Sigma protocol, into the Schnorr signature scheme, and we can attach any message. But it's worth mentioning the very important distinction between those 2 cases, right? Because if you have a signature, if I give you a signature saying, I am Waxwing, you can take that signature and give it to someone else. They're transferable. So an I am signature is stupid, right? What you actually would need there is an identity protocol with an interaction. So the advantage of an interactive protocol is it's deniable. But as it turns out in practice, people tend to just use signatures. It's much more convenient and useful in a broader set of contexts to have signatures than to have an interactive identity protocol. Interactive is annoying. So we tend to just work with signatures. And just to summarize visually what I'm talking about, on the left is the ID protocol, 3 rounds, yeah? Forwards, backwards, forwards again. On the right, it's just 1 round. You just send both the commitment R and the response S. And of course, V must be able to recreate that hash based on the information given. All right. Now, in the last section of the talk, I want to show you where it gets interesting, which is we combine multiple Sigma protocols together. An obvious thing to do is to ask, what if we had 2 private keys and we wanted to prove knowledge of both of them? So what do? Obvious answer is we just run 2 Sigma protocols, right? But you could be slightly more efficient than that. Sorry, that was my quiz question. I'm out of order there. You can be slightly more efficient than that. You can just use 1 challenge. So send the 2 commitments for the 2 keys, get 1 challenge value back, and then combine the challenge with each of the 2 individual commitment nonces and your individual private keys, sending 2 S values out. So the verifier is going to have to verify 2 conditions simultaneously here, but at least we saved 1 challenge worth of bandwidth in that version. So it's not very interesting at all, really, but it's a good, solid building block. We've got the AND. We can AND lots of different things together. We can prove that we know multiple things at once in simple terms. What should be included in the hash, though? Because if we do this in the Fiat-Shamir transform case, we're going to be, remember before, we just hashed in the nonce, right? So I hope it's clear we need to hash in both of the nonces. It wouldn't work otherwise. We certainly can't just hash in the sum of the nonces. That's not sound. But I guess that's arguing about soundness proofs, which we shouldn't get into today. The OR of sigma protocols is a bit more difficult, but it's really interesting. And this construction is due to Kramer, Damgaard, and Schoenmakers from 1994. But I wanted to mention there is another construction which is actually more widely used today, Abe, Okubo, and Suzuki in 2002. But this basic one is very, very useful and insightful, I think. Basically, what you do is you construct, so you've got two private keys, but you don't know one of them. You know, in this case, we know x2, but we don't know x1. So how are we going to prove to the other guy that we know one of x1 or x2, but not let him know which one? So the answer is we kind of do the two sigma protocols, but we do one of them honestly, and we do the other one fake. We fake the other one. So when I say fake, I mean we construct the first nonce as R1 equals S1G minus C1P1, where we choose C1. And then we choose the second nonce the normal way, using a K value. And he sends a single challenge, C. And the trick of it is that at the end of the day, the two challenges for the two sigma protocols have to XOR to the total challenge C that the verifier sent us. And so by doing that, it means that he's going to verify each of the signature equations, S2 equals K2 plus C2X2, S1 equals, that's the construction. He's going to verify twice S1 and S2, and it's going to come out right. And he's only going to have sent one challenge, and he's going to see that both of those challenges are such that they XOR. You could use add here, it's fine, to C. And so I realize in a context like this is a bit academic, right? And some of you were like, what the heck's going on? Some of you will understand, sort of, right? But you might need a bit more time to sort of digest it. But essentially, this is a nice trick because it means that it's a really fundamental trick. It means that we can prove knowledge of one of a whole set of keys and absolutely reveal nothing about which one we knew, but that we knew at least one. Very technical point, but if those of you know about Wagner's attack superficially does apply to that construction. It's actually in his original paper, but because the protocol has special soundness, it doesn't actually work and break it. So it's a very technical, but just for anyone who cares. The AOS style is different. The things like Monero and all the various ring signatures we've seen, like also Borromean ring signatures that we use in confidential transactions, they're all based on this AOS style, which is different. I haven't got time, but it's just a slightly cleverer way of doing the same thing. Special case of the AND, so combining two protocols, sigma protocols together with the same key, but on different generators or different base points G and H. Here, it's exactly the same as AND. It's just a little bit more efficient. Because what's going on here is that we still only send one challenge from the verifier, and we still have to send two original nonce points, but we're only using one nonce secret value K. It's just that we're applying it to two different generators G and H. So hang on, what is going on there? P is sending R1 and R2, the verifier is sending C, but the trick is because we only use one K value, we only have to send back one response. So the so to speak signature value in this case is just one S, but we did still have to send two R values at the start. So this allows us to prove that 2 points P and Q have the same private key, but not with respect to the same generator G. Okay? And this is used in a whole lot of different situations, surprisingly. Join market uses it, surprisingly, which I will explain tomorrow if anyone wants to hear more about it. But it's also used, privacy pass. It's lots of these more complex protocols use this primitive idea. The other one I forgot to mention was the signature adapter scheme for ECDSA, which some of you will have heard of or know about. I think it was Nadav Cohen that came up with it, or maybe somebody else did. Anyway, that also uses a discrete log equivalence proof like this. The reason it's cool is because it allows you to prove that two keys are related, but still keep some hiding of which key you're talking about. OK, this is the most complex one. And the reason I know, it's a lot of equations. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I want you to get into your head the idea that sigma protocols can be combined in large groups, and you can prove zero-knowledge statements about them. I can prove to you that the private keys for this 10 set of public keys are related by the formula 3x1 plus 7xy of x2 minus 20 of those is equal to 25, or whatever. I can make any relationship, prove that it's true to you without revealing any of the keys. So this is, in a way, this is like baby's first zero-knowledge proof system, right? This is like the most basic zero-knowledge proof system. And it's cool. You can build like arithmetic circuits and stuff with it. But the thing about it is, it's kind of linear in the size of what you're proving. So if you've got n keys, it's linear in that. If you double the number of private keys you're dealing with, it's double as big. And it's also linear in the number of conditions you have. So if you're writing several different simultaneous equations, you have to have a whole extra set of stuff for each one of those equations. So it only is practically useful to use combinations of sigma protocols in this simple way for very small sets of conditions and keys. So really advanced stuff, like you're trying to do a zero-knowledge proof of a SHA-2 hash. You're not going to use this. It's going to be a mess. It's way too large. But it's very tractable, and it's just based on elliptic curve discrete log, or discrete log in general. So it's very simple and understandable. It has the same kind of proofs as even just the basic Schnorr signature. I don't know if I really want to go through this. Just basically, you can see the idea that you send lots of different responses. There's still just one challenge, but you send lots of commitments. So it's still the sigma protocol, right? There's commit, challenge, and then response. It's just that the commit has several elements, and the response has several elements. And you can go through the algebra if it's interesting to you. I can explain it to you later. OK, basically finished. This is a little quiz for you, just to make sure you understood everything right. Yeah. It's something you can think about, if you like, after the talk. Is could you figure out how to make a sigma protocol to prove that you know the opening of a Pedersen commitment? So for those of you who don't know what a Pedersen commitment is, it's a way of committing to a value using elliptic curve with a hiding and binding property. So I can commit to the value 10, so A equals 10. I make up a random number R out of the set of the scalars in the field. I calculate the point C, and that's a commitment to the value A. And to open the commitment, I have to give out R and A. So can you prove you know the opening of the commitment without revealing the commitment? If you understood everything in my talk, which I admit is it's a bit of a tall order in such a short time, but if you did, you should be able to write out that proof. I think I'll stop there. There's just a bunch of references at the end. If you want to read my slides, they're on my Mastodon, so everyone can easily find that, right? OK, that's it. I'm done. Thank you. It's my GPG key, my code signing key, if anyone wants it. Yeah.
Oh, something to note. The DLEQS used in privacy pass is actually a compact proof.
Oh, it's not this.
It's not checking the scalar multiplication on the points. It's checking the hash. So yeah, just mentioning that.
Okay. Well, okay. No, there's a more compact one. I got it. Yeah.
Hey, anyone else?
Yeah. So if we do any of these linear, we're not losing any security if we do any of these, like, that's what you mentioned, like, we're not losing any security whether to Wagner's attack or we're still in the same security.
Yeah, it's the same soundness because you can still construct an extractor for the secrets. So it's the same soundness property.
Yeah, but anyways.
Yeah, it's a good, valid question. Very,
yeah, we can take it off.
Yeah.
Specific.
Yeah.
All right, if there are no further questions, thank you very much, Adam.